if you were, if you saved your town, right? Like, say you in the town that you live, you became a hero for the town, and you did something of great value for the town. You saved a bunch of people. You did something, right? Well, the people that are grateful for that action are going to want to do something in commemoration of you, right? And so they might put up a plaque, or depending on how great you were of a hero, they might be like, let's put up a statue of this person, right? And so they're like, hey, you know what, this person did some really great stuff. Let's, commemorate them with a statue, right? And so what I'm thinking is that the evolution of gods, right? Because we believe that ancient cultures um, predominantly practiced animism, and over time, this practice of animism evolved into, um, you know, this pantheon of gods, where each uh, force of nature slowly became more and more um, venerated until they had their own stories and mythology and characteristics and personalities, right? People's continue to provide these so-called spirits with more and more human characteristics until they were nearly synonymous with humans. Um, However, I also think that there's a mix of in there, because so there's the evolution of certain things like the storm god, right, became Zeus, and things along these lines, right, because storms were dangerous, and so you wanted to have storms on your side because a bad storm brings death potentially, and so you really want to be on the good side of the storm god or the spirit of the storms. And so you do a lot of things to venerate in order to appease this god, right? Or this spirit. And over time, that evolved into, it's not a spirit, it's a god, right? This whole nother level of um, like hierarchy, basically. But what I think can also happen is when people kind of get lost in this veneration and stuff, right? So they had this kind of concept, right? And so when people came and helped out a town or a civilization, right? It went from a veneration of this hero into this, like over time, this hero evolved into a god or a goddess over long periods of time, because the generations that were actually, you know, benefited by this hero had passed away, and all that remained was stories that potentially got embellished with time. And so I think that there are a lot of gods that were potentially based off of real people doing real things, right? And over time, that that real level kind of got disconnected from a person, and they went from being a person to a god or a goddess. And that is why I think there are these gods that um, you know have such big followings in certain regions, and I think it has to do with the fact that these people were helped in the development of their civilization, and that leader that got their civilization going went from the founder into, you know the hero, into the champion, into the god, right? This evolution slowly continued as people got farther and farther away from the actual event, and the stories got more and more ambiguous and embellished and less realistic and became more myth than fact, right? And so something as simple as they came and, you know, helped develop agriculture and gave them knowledge and language, that eventually became the god of knowledge and fertility, right? This god came and showed the people how to have food abundance. And, you know, food is everything when that's the main reason why you're struggling to survive, is because you're always constantly struggling to find food. Well, um, when someone comes along and removes that struggle from your life, that is a very powerful thing to those people. And so I think that that's pretty much what happened. Um, People went from just a person, a great person, and they slowly became gods. And then these gods became less and less connected with the person and more their own, um, creations, basically their own beings. And then eventually, these gods were replaced with, um, new gods that, um, whatever civilization that conquered them had for themselves, right? Because when Christians or Catholics went to other places, they didn't say, "Oh, your gods, you can keep your gods." No, usually they were like, "All right, you follow our God," right? And that's just how a lot of religion has been. And so I think that it's pretty much a similar thing that happened here. So we only have remnants of what these gods were, but a lot of them were never gods to begin with. When if you went far enough back in the history, which I think is quite fascinating. And so yeah, that's all I had to say. Peace out. Yeah. All right. Well, almost sat on a plane. Basically, um, I don't think that um, all gods originate from this, but I think there are a lot of gods that do, and certain gods like Athena, I feel like fit this character, right? I think Apollo fits this character, where they go from being a hero into a god, right? They became more than just a symbol, right? Because initially they were inspiration, and then from inspiration they became, you know, their purpose, right? Their reason for like being alive and their veneration and all these things. Because over time people need something to kind of latch onto. And so I think that's kind of what happened. And I just think it's interesting to look at it from this lens, because you look at these gods and you hear these stories about gods and you think, oh, this is, this they had these certain beliefs. But I feel like, um, actually what happened is that um, they didn't start out venerating gods; they venerated spirits, right? But then they turned that veneration towards their heroes, and those heroes became gods. And then after they had developed gods in that way, then they saw gods, rather than being these spirits of the land, they turned into these human forms instead. And so that's how that transition from venerating the spirits of the land and things along those lines became worship of the gods. And so I think it's kind of interesting to see that light and think about it in that context. If it's not true or not, I guess is up for debate. But if it is true, it's quite an interesting thing to think about, at least from you know how people think and how certain beliefs evolve and how that all functions, and going into the human mind and human behavior and things along those lines.
And so I just kind of wanted to bring it up as a potential option, something that I was thinking about. So speak about it. But yeah, peace out.